after, sorry, Moha, I missed the beginning bit. See, freeing. Yeah, it means you've got a broader talent pool. It means your teams are probably going to be more effective. It just means that we have more awareness of how we talk to each other, potentially better problem solving as well, potentially a little bit more awareness raising. And it means that everyone can obviously grow together, learn together, including those people who have diagnosis or who have suspicions that they might have some presentations of it. Now, normally I start with a share on all of the kind of labels, but I thought I'd share, I am sharing the labels, but I thought I'd share some of the strengths and genius, it's called, which my ego likes, but it's just a way of saying the different things that those people who have neurodivergence can bring. So I'm going to just share this slide. Now, bear with me while I navigate around my deck a little bit, because I will probably wiggle around this somewhat today. I thought I'd share this. Can everyone see that slide okay? Great. So we want to have a little read of this. I'm not going to sort of patronize and read around it with you, but I just want you to have a look. And if anyone would like me to read anything out, please let me know. And I will send these on as well so that you have them as a reference, if that's helpful, because it's quite a lot of information to take in. And I just wondered if anything was a surprise to anyone or was new information from this.
I think I've never thought about acquired neurodivergence before. So that's a new thing for me.
Yeah, it can come on through things like trauma, different life events, all sorts of things like that. So it's something that a lot of people who are sort of older diagnosis will have people say to them, well, you weren't like this as a kid. And of course, that can be a real thing because maybe they were and it just wasn't, we didn't have the knowledge then, or maybe it was acquired. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other sort of questions or things that are jumping out? Anyone?
I really like how it picks out the positives there.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Miranda. I do too, because quite often we get the challenges and the negatives and the workarounds. And yes, we do have to be aware of those, but it's like everything, it's a double-edged sword, right? Which is there are loads of things. And actually being aware of this means that I think rather than being a bit avoidant or hesitant or walking on eggshells around it, you go, actually, that person has presentations of autism. Maybe I could go to them to help with this because they're really going to be detailed and they're really going to be able to put their head on it for a long time. And then we start to work with this a lot more differently. We view it in a different way. Yeah. I'm going to head on to my next slide then. So there's a few other things that are presentations within neurodivergence, and obviously it depends on the coexisting or whether they are just on their own. Rejection sensitivity, one that I think is one to be really mindful of. Do you all know what rejection sensitivity is? Anyone know what it is? So basically any sort of rejection, even if it might feel really mild for most people, can be really painful, like physically painful for some people who have neurodivergence. So a harsh bit of feedback, for example, you might have to be mindful about how you position that. By saying no to somebody, you might have to be mindful about how that lands, because the rejection sensitivity can hang around for days sometimes, and it can be really debilitating for some people. There's also a strong sense of, oh, my slide's not working, that's annoying. There we go. Justice sensitivity, which again can be, like to place around, but it can be good or bad, right? So having a real sense of justice can be a real strength, but it also means that there can be a particular sensitivity around justice that can feel very, very personal for people. Strong visual and spatial reasoning, so not often as logical as other people, unless they have, unless someone has presentations of autism, but can actually make sense of things in a three-dimensional or dynamic way, which can be super useful, especially when you're looking at team dynamics and constellations of people, relationships with people. We touched on this before. You've obviously got that deep focus on areas of interest. And that works just as much for ADHD as autism, as dyslexia. You hit on someone's passion or interest, they can absolutely go down that rabbit hole on it, which can be super useful and also can be super unhelpful if we don't want them down that rabbit hole for too long. So it might need to be managed. We've got heightened empathy, very useful skill. Can be very aware of how things land on other people. So if you've ever got anything delicate that needs to be addressed, not a bad call to bring someone who is neurodivergent into the mix and ask what their perspective is on it. Or if you want to check anything through with them, they'll have a stronger sense of that. Tend to be more creative and innovative, tend to be good at coming up with different ideas or thinking about things in a different way. And also we have that courage and resilience, which you just end up having. And that's not to say other people don't have this, by the way, but most people who have neurodivergence will have this in absolute bucket loads because they've had to live with it. They've had to live with it. And until recently, it hasn't really been much talked about or much understood. And we're still on that road. So again, just to think about these strengths and where you might be able to pull on them, and also have the awarenesses of where these things might play in. So I'm going to go through just a few of the things that we have, and I'm just going to speak these. So you've got ADHD, you've got autism, you've got dyscalculia, you've got dyslexia, you've got dyspraxia, also other health parallels that can come into it, like anxieties, depression, OCD is in there, Tourette's is in there. Some forms of complex PTSD and PTSD can often run parallel as well. So quite a mixture. And that, I would say with that, means that we're not expecting anybody to be able to be absolute ninjas at all of this, but it is just about how do we have the conversations? How do we ask the questions? And even if someone says, you know, I'm ADHD or I'm ODHD or I'm dyslexic or whatever, always worth just asking the question about what do they need, or how does that present for them? Because just to make things even more complex, things present very differently for people. So asking things like, I always think questions like, okay, how does it present for you? Or what do you need me to be aware of? Or what things do I need to do to best support you? Can be really useful questions. And then we can't really go far wrong because we're getting it from that person or from those people. So that's a very simple thing that we can do. There is a lovely anecdote that I scribbled down a while ago by Martin McKay, who's the executive chairman for Everyway. And he is dyslexic, and he went through life dyslexic for a long time before he had a diagnosis and struggled in school and all of that. Now a really successful businessman. But he calls, when he says we are neuroinclusive, he says, oh, it's like someone gives me glasses for my neurodivergence. It's like suddenly I can see. So I just love that. It's like when suddenly people understand what it is that I need, or we change things around a little bit, suddenly feel like I've got the right pair of specs on. And I just really love that, because I think it really helps people understand the difference that can make, these small things, these small adjustments. So some common characteristics, and as I said before, always ask people what those specifics are for them. But to give us a bit of an overview, I'm going to bring up a few things around a few of these conditions, and then we're going to look at some strategies and some things to be aware of from your perspective in your world. So, sorry, doing the share thing in the background, which is always a little bit fiddly, so bear with me. Where are we? Okay. Can you see this share at all, or do I need to reshare this? Can't see it. Okay, let me reshare. Can we see this? You good? Yeah, brilliant. So common characteristics. So I'm going to whip through this quite quickly. So I'm sorry if this gets a little bit busy. Variable attention and focus, might hyperfocus on areas of interest. We sort of mentioned that before. Has challenges with working memory. So short-term memory, mine is awful. I have some ADHD presentations. Long-term is great, but short-term terrible. So just being aware of that. And again, sometimes encouraging people just to like write things down more, make notes on things. The need for movement and stimulation is huge, especially if you're expecting people to sit still for a long time through a meeting. Give them plenty of breaks, give them options to move. You know, it's okay if you need to move, if you need to get up and, you know, shake around a little bit, make that okay for people. Processing many thoughts simultaneously, which can cause a bombardment sometimes of speech and things like that that can come through. Time management challenges, sometimes more for some than others, but that can be a thing. And so there's often a lot of shame with that one. There's a lot of shame with all of it, but there's often a lot of shame. So again, just being sensitive around if someone does seem to have an issue with time, it's not that they just can't get their stuff together. It might be that they're cognitively, just their sense of time is a little bit elastic, and it might be worth just inquiring, because I've definitely had shame around this for me. And I run time management for CIPR now, which is my way of working around it. But it's definitely something that it can get a lot of judgment, as if someone's been rubbish, and actually it can be quite a challenge for some people. And we do sometimes need to find workarounds for that one. Strong divergent thinking, an absolute strength until we have to converge, and then not so much, but great for that part of it. And then difficulty with transitions. So things like clearly marking things out when you're changing from one topic to another are really key when you've got someone with a strong presentation of ADHD. So a few things around ADHD that can be done specifically. Incorporate movement breaks. Explicit signal of transitions between topics. So I said these two things before. We've got breaking things into shorter sections, which is particularly important if we're online as well, because that attention span gets even shorter. Providing fidget or stim options, stress balls, doodle pads, things that can be tactile where possible. Timers, ways of dealing with time, offering those can be useful, and creating visually engaging material. Also reminding people that they can pre-read things, sending things ahead of time for people so they can get their heads in the right place. And then recognizing that note-taking, voice note is a really useful way of dealing with this. Also true when people are pulling documents together, incidentally, to use dictation tools, of which there are many now. So I'm aware I'm sort of flown through that a little bit. Does anyone have any questions so far? Okay. So let's go to autism. Sensory sensitivities are huge for people who have presentations of autism. So sound, light, touch. So that, again, very specific to the individual. Tend to have a preference for clear instructions and expectations. So not over-clarify, like not being afraid to over-clarify is key with this one. And then check in, is it clear? Do you need any more information? Deep focus and attention to detail, as we touched on before, which can be a huge, huge strength. Pattern recognition. So if you've got a problem that needs to be solved, or you're like, I can't quite work out what the common feature is here, or what might be going on here, ask if anyone has a presentation of autism and they can help you, which is quite a nice way of doing it, right? To ask that question. Has anyone got autism? Has anyone got any presentation of autism? You might be good at this. And Miranda, I have to play to your point again, you know, it's just really nice to go at it from that position rather than, oh, what allowances do we need to make? I roll, which I've most certainly had in my direction over recent months. And it's like, okay, it's kind of 1 in 5 to 1 in 7 people who are have neurodivergence present. That's those who are aware. And I have had people come to me and say, what about the other 4 people in the room? So it's worth saying at some point, if you make allowances for people who have neurodivergence, nobody's going to miss out. That they will also benefit everybody else. It's not bad to be over clarifying or to give people more ways of learning or processing information. Like, everyone can benefit from these things. Social dynamics in the group may be challenging. This is a really important one, because sometimes we can spotlight people, or we can go, actually, blah, can you just give us, and if that person isn't prepared for that, that can be really quite harrowing for them. So giving people an option of how they contribute, and again, asking how they want to contribute, how are you comfortable? Direct communication style, which sometimes can come across as rude, arrogant, disrespectful, not towing the line, not respecting rules. Those sorts of judgments can come in, but actually, again, recognizing that it's a way of neural processing that is at hand, and then just recognizing that there needs to be a different way to work around some of these things. And then again, a bit like the ADHD, has strong interest in specific topics, which can be really helpful. So I'm going to go through autism here. I have got slides on dyslexia, dyscalculia, and a few other things. I'm not going to go through all of them because it will take a lot of time, but I am going to make sure you get all of them sent to you so that you can reference them. But before I jump on to the next bit, just to finish off this autism piece, giving written instructions alongside verbal ones, really useful. Minimizing background noise and visual clutter. That's huge and often gets missed. And I recognize that logistically, sometimes we can't have as much freedom as we might want, in the spaces that we use, but really recognizing if there's some really bright lights overhead and it's a bit noisy, that's going to be very, very difficult. Let's be honest, probably for most people, but particularly if you have presentations of autism and ADHD, that's going to really be painful. Some of you might even be in the room, and some of you might be kind of nodding along here as well. I recognize that I'm unlikely to be the only person here. Offer quiet spaces or breaks, places where people can process. I love the ATC venues that CIPR use for this, because there's always little breakout areas and little spaces for people to go and think and process on their own. Is perfect, because I can just say when I run an in-person session, you know, if you want to go work on your own, and people sometimes do, and it's great because the lighting's quite soft in those breakouts as well. So places like that are fab. Allowing additional processing time for questions. So sometimes giving questions ahead of time, or asking a question and saying, I'm going to give you a few minutes to think about that and I'll come back. Do you want to write your answer? Do you want to give your answer in a different way? Providing alternative participation options. We sort of covered that. Use very concrete examples. If we talk in metaphor or abstract terms, they can be hard for someone who has presentations of autism. This is also, I feel like, as someone whose strongest thing is ADHD and dyspraxia, they're my two biggest ones. This is a challenge for me. So this is where some people who have one type of neurodivergence can really knock against another type of neurodivergence. So it's worth being aware of that complexity too, because my brain is like, I go big picture and I'm really good at like seeing it, but I'm not always great at articulating it, and it's can drive someone with autism insane. So it's worth recognizing that. And actually, do you need another person to help? That's another option. Could someone else come in and help decode a little bit or create a bit more of a bridge? Just being explicit about social expectations, and then considering things like I've said, this lighting, temperature, and room layout, making sure things aren't too cluttered or feel too stifling. So I'm just going to stop the share for a minute, because everyone goes into tiny little square when I share, and I'd like to see everyone's faces. Is there something in the, oh yeah, John, thank you, John, twin there. Anyone have anything that they want to pick up on so far from anything I've said? Any questions, any insights, any additional information? It's all welcome.
Just really helpful. Thank you.
Oh, good. I'm glad, Rose. Pleasure. There's so much. That's the thing. I'm like trying to shove it all in. But as I said, I'll send you some stuff. And there's a lot of other resources that I can send on as well, and reads, which I'll put in the end of the deck for those of you who might want to have a bit more of a further delve in your own time and space.
Yeah.
When you mentioned that, you know, oh, this might be good for somebody with autism, why don't you take this on? I'd be very sensitive to doing that and calling out somebody's being neurodivergent, unless, you know, there might be a strength, it might help that project, but I'm not going to call them out and say, oh, you've got the right sort of brain for this, in a way that I then label them. How does that work?
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. And I would agree with you not to kind of go in with that angle. I mean, again, it's taken it from other people. So it's asking, first of all. So if they have disclosed, I have the same mug as you, only mine has a Bichon Frise on it, just incidentally. If they disclose it, because that's the other thing, not everyone discloses it or wants to disclose it. So if they have disclosed it, then maybe there's a conversation you can have, but I would always lead with a question rather than a statement. So you've got the right sort of brain for this, which is saying, hey, I'm just wondering if this might be something you're good at, and allow someone to say yes or no. But it's a great call, Avril, because that clarity of communication is everything, isn't it? Yeah, brilliant. Does that answer your question? Perfect, great. So to share now as well some universal strategies that will benefit multiple neurotypes, including neurotypical. I always kind of say this, including neurotypical people. So I'm going to do another share here. Bear with me while I clunk around in the background. Now that you know I have some degree of dyspraxia, I'm hoping you're going to give me some concessions for this. Where are we? Okay. Okay. So thinking about agendas, just a few kind of specifics that I thought might be quite useful to look at. Sending the agenda at least 48 hours ahead and not just the day before. And I know that puts a challenge on people and it means everyone has to get a little bit more organized, but it does really help people process, think about what's required of them and do the preparation that they need. So that's kind of our part of the bargain. And then other people can, you know, do what they need in the background. But if you get something last minute, it can cause quite a lot of stress. Like I said, not just with neurodivergence, with all of us. Include timings, signposting, names of who is leading what. That can be super useful for people just to know, okay, I know what to expect here. There aren't going to be any big surprises. I've got a bit of a sense of timings, which is helpful for everybody. And then ensure that regular breaks and options to stand if preferable. Now, obviously, it varies depending on the space, but always saying to people, if you want to stand, it's cool. If you need to move around, it's fine. Sometimes just giving that permission at the beginning of any meeting or within agenda notes can be really useful. It just helps people stop feeling self-conscious or like they can't. Breaking complex information into manageable chunks, whether spoken or written. So using the pause, using the blank space, really important, and be succinct where you can. Vary pace and tone to create more engagement. And then we've got asking key questions up front and allowing thinking time and not putting anyone on the spot. So I touched on that with the autism. This, again, is something that can be really useful. I know people who are dyslexic who also can be mortified if someone sort of spotlights them unexpectedly. They can go into a real panic. So just being aware of that. Offering the chat box features, follow-up, email and chat options as well. Not everyone feels like they want to speak up in the room or can articulate themselves in the room. Or maybe they need to process what's been said in the meeting and then come back to you later. But again, if you manage this in the agenda up front, it helps put people at ease. So a lot of this stuff you can manage ahead of time and then repeat it upon meeting, and that makes a big difference. And then you're summarizing decisions and key points. So going back over things, back to this point of we cannot clarify enough. We cannot be over clear. So going back over summaries, decisions, double checking that everyone has understood what is required of them, really, really key. So environmental considerations, a few of them we've touched on, but just to consolidate and bring these together so that they're universal. Noise levels, sometimes worth reminding people about the option to bring noise cancelling headphones or loop earbuds. They can be really useful, or any version of that. There's quite a few out there now. Just saying to people, you know, if you need anything to deal with noise, you're very welcome to use them. Can be useful. Building in regular movement and sensory breaks. This one is a recurrent thing. It gets missed a lot, especially when we're trying to put a lot of stuff into short windows of time, which, you know, we are all doing a lot of the time. Making sure there's enough fresh air circulation. That one is really key. But again, we all benefit from that. That's not something that is, you know, unique particularly. Where you can, consider natural lighting options or dimmer options. I've definitely, when I've run events before and the lighting's been a bit tricky, I've just taken lamps with me, so a few little table lamps, and put them around the space and then turn the lights off and use those. So yes, it's a little bit of a pain to bring them in a suitcase, but it does make a big difference to how something can run if it's a particularly stark or strip lighted room, because they can be quite jarring for people, especially if it's a long period of time. Establishing your clear start end times for networking. If people are required to have communication, let them know when that will start and when that will end, because that means if they don't want to do it, they can make themselves scarce, they can be back again without drawing attention to themselves. Comfortable space as much as we can. Little things like, you know, mostly we do this, but like little refreshments on the table. I quite often will take fidget toys, for like the therapy clay, notebooks, things that just people can fiddle with. It just gives a softness to the environment, and it tells people that it's okay for them to take what they need if they need something to stim with. Allowing flexibility in seating arrangement. So, you know, you're all on a table of 6, for example, can be horrible for some people. So the table of 6, table of 3, a pair, maybe a few chairs on their own, and then people can choose what they prefer in terms of where they sit. And just to back that up, offering quiet space options where possible. So I've got one more of these and then a few remembrances, and then hopefully there's some time for questions or reflections. How to engage with people or things, just again to be aware of that can be helpful. Provide multiple ways to demonstrate understanding. So again, this is something you might ask people ahead of time, but always give options. So, you know, just give me a thumbs up or nod, or you can ask a question. Or, you know, if you give people 2 or 3 options and how they can respond to you, they'll usually be able to find one that is usable for them. Rather than, can you put your hands up? Can you put your hands up? Has everyone put their hands up? Which we've probably all been in the presence of that, right? And it's never ill intended, but for someone who finds that difficult, it's not useful and they can't contribute very well. Alternative to verbal participation, so sticky notes, digital inputs. And I think we're better at this. Things like word cloud, you know, interactive things like that can be useful. They do take a little bit of setting up, but when in doubt, just give people stickies, Sharpies. They can do things that way, or indeed, obviously, online chat box. Balance group and individual activities. So playing to the point before around seating almost. If we want group discussion, also give people like time for quiet reflection in there. Have a think about this for yourself. Let's just take a few minutes to reflect so that nobody feels on the spot with that. You walk around if you want, you know, some people can walk around if they feel a little bit self-conscious, just sitting in silence. I've said this one, but again, avoid putting people on the spot, allow for written and verbal responses. Create a psychologically safe environment for questions. So it's really interesting. So I don't know if anyone's come across the 4 pillars of psychological safety before. So it's inclusion, question, challenge. Am I getting this right? Yeah. Inclusion is the first kind of touchstone of it. Then feeling safe enough to ask questions, then feeling safe enough to challenge, and then feeling safe enough to contribute and collaborate. So they kind of build on each other. So if there isn't a sense of inclusion, people will not ask questions or do any of the other 2 things. So again, it just goes back to that initial point about being inclusive and how that's important. And just by being inclusive and demonstrating that things are okay and people can work how they feel happy working, that helps them feel encouraged to contribute without feeling like they're going to be judged. Varied discussion formats, pairs, small groups, whole groups, kind of plays again to some of the things that we've said already. And then we've got giving process time after posing questions. Again, we've touched on that one, but again, just looking at all of the places where you can do that. And providing follow-up options for after session questions. So giving an email or giving a survey link or something where people can follow up with you. Really, really important. There are a few things just to cap this before we go into a bit of a conversation here. Touched on this mainly in response to Avril's question, which is asking participants about preferences where appropriate, but also know that not everyone knows what they need. Some people are on a journey and they're still discovering. Some people aren't sure if they've got a neurodivergence. Some people have just recently been diagnosed. I'm still discovering things all the time. I think we all are, right? So just recognizing that people might not always know what they need and then going, well, that's all right. You can just figure it out or see how you go. Let me know if you need anything else, you know, making it all safe. You don't have to make all of these changes all at once. That's the other thing. It can feel overwhelming to think, oh, I've got to think about this and this and this and this, and there's a whole load of stuff. Just think about 1 or 2 things that you can do that feel really low bar, really easy to implement, and start there. Because even 1 or 2 implementations of these things can make a big difference. The other thing is recognizing, and I've said this before, these strategies, like they support all humans, not just neurodivergent humans or humans with neurodivergence, to rephrase that into the linguistic nuances that are coming out now. Be flexible and willing to adapt. Don't try to get it perfect. If you make a mistake, like just go, oh, sorry, got that wrong. Okay, noted. You know, we don't have to make a big deal of it. That's the other thing. Just accept it, build on it. And know that creating inclusive environments is absolutely an ongoing process for everybody, including those people who might have those presentations of neurodivergence. So quite a sort of swathe of information there. I'm going to stop the share because I'd like to open this up for the last 10 minutes into a bit more of a conversation around questions, insights, anything at all that's come out from any of that for anybody in terms of what you might like to know, what you might need.
I suppose from my point of view, thank you for that, by the way. That was good. I actually work for a youth work charity in my day job, and so it's obviously, you know, very sort of, we speak about it a lot here with the young people that that the youth workers support. So yeah, it was really interesting. From a, you know, chair of a committee point of view, I know that you touched on a lot of different things there, but is there more that, you know, as a chair that I could be doing to support my committee?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what you're doing. It sounds like you're really self-aware already, Rose, around this stuff. But I would just initiate the conversations. I ask people, and maybe people could even, you know, put things in anonymously, but just asking, you know, who has any requirements or who has any need for any of these things, or if anyone even just has a different preference for how information is presented to them. It may not even be related to neurodivergence necessarily, because we all have different learning styles as well. We do tend to, because of the way we're educated, stick to one or two ways of delivering information, whereas actually there's way more choice, and sometimes we haven't thought about all of the options. So I think that would be a good starting point, and letting people know that you're open for the information and that you want to make this, you know, make the situation and the environment as inclusive as it can be. I think it would be a great place to start, actually.
Yeah, thank you. Because we've never asked the questions. I think some people, like you say, some people are kind of quite open to, you know, say if they've got autism or ADHD. And some, like you say, don't know or don't want it to be, don't want to sort of talk about it too much. So it's very much dependent on the person, isn't it? So
it really is, yeah. So I mean, yeah, give people that anonymous option as well. You can put your name if you want, but if you'd rather stay anonymous, that's fine. You know,
thank you.
Go from there. Thank you. Any other questions or things that people would like to throw into the mix? Yeah, Miranda, go for it.
Yeah, I just going back to those positives at the beginning and knowing we're quite a new group. I'm the Independent Practitioner Network. So as indies, we're all quite, I wouldn't say necessarily neurodivergent, but divergent in the way we operate and work, just for the fact that we all work independently. But we've had a couple of people who've been quite vocal about what neurodivergencies they have. And now just seeing those positives and seeing what they put themselves forward for wanting to do within the committee, I can see they're really playing to their strengths, and what a really amazing thing that is to understand the strengths of people with neurodiversity and what they can bring to a committee. It's fantastic. I never thought about it that way. Thank you.
Oh, I'm so pleased. Oh, no, that's great. And it's great that you're already seeing that when you're thinking about your examples in your head and you're like, oh, I know that's making sense now, right? Because that's how this stuff works. It's just about the awareness raising, and then we just work better together. It's like, you know, I do a lot of stuff around creativity, and I always say we're all creative in different ways, but it's just how you orchestrate that creativity. And I think it's the same with this, is how do you orchestrate the neurodiversity that you've got in any given situation so that it, you know, together it is much stronger, without that sounding trite or empty, but, you know, for that to really make a difference. Yeah, thank you for that. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Alison.
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to kind of say thank you for the practical tips on the agendas. I think that was really useful. And for those of you who didn't attend it earlier in this year, the person who did the delivery around kind of running meetings, that really aligned with that.
Oh, good.
So we kind of took some of those kind of things on board, such as the pre-reads, for example, and setting your agenda out as a series of questions, as primary questions, to kind of enable discussion. So it's really interesting to see how that kind of married along kind of holding better meetings as well. Second thing I kind of wanted to say was really just an observation around how neurodivergence can potentially overlap with the management of neurological conditions. So, for example, I worked with somebody who had a benign brain tumour, but this caused him to have narcolepsy, and I suspect he probably had ASD prior to this condition, but which meant interaction was sometimes quite difficult, and certainly because he was in a leadership role, then there was a whole kind of ramifications around emotional intelligence and how people responded to, you know, the conversations that went on in that organisation. I just wondered if you kind of come across anything that kind of complex and how potentially you might deal with that from both a sort of you know, being involved in that type of work environment or even in a leadership perspective.
God, that's such a good question. It's interesting as well, because I had an uncle who had a brain tumor many years ago who was diagnosed as schizophrenic, and actually it was the brain tumor. It wasn't that he had schizophrenia, it was the pressure. And it's such a good point that you make, that I haven't had a lot of direct experience with it, but I would say that, what would I say? Asking the questions where you can. But again, it's kind of a learning as you go thing, this, isn't it? And it's reading up on as much stuff as we can, learning about the brain a lot more. I mean, the brain is such a fascinating organ, and it dictates so much. So I think the awareness around how our brain works, the sort of neuroscience that's out there, anything around neurology would probably be beneficial. So I guess if there's anything out there, I'll have a look as well, Alison, to see if I can find anything. It's a really important point that you've raised, and it's actually one that I hadn't really considered until you've asked it. So yeah, good piece of conversation.
It's kind of strange, because it's really useful to kind of look at the nature of people's neurodivergence, and obviously where there are characteristics, but sometimes life throws a curved ball, doesn't it?
Oh yeah,
You get an amalgam.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to have a delve into that for you and see what I can find, and then whatever I find, I'll send on.
That's great. Thank you, Danny.
Pleasure. Thank you for the questions. Great. John, hi.
Hello, and can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, we can, yeah.
That's fine. Apologies. I had to borrow these headphones. All of my tech went wrong, which is why I was late for this. So as a neurodivergent person in a random public space, everything went wrong before this. So I was like, ooh. My point being, I was actually just going to, I was thinking about saying something beforehand, but just to respond to your point there, Alison, there's a new book that's just come out through Krogan Page. It is Neuroscience in Communications, I think, and they've just put a whole chapter in about working with neurodivergent people as well. I haven't seen it. It was published in August. So it was something I was looking at for one of the CIPR diplomas I'm doing, but it might be worth having a look at that. So that was the reason I did raise my hand on this. But I think the other interesting point was the reference to EQ a second ago. Just the fact that often I got diagnosed with ASD and ADHD just 20 months ago, so very late in my career. And one of the key things through my career, I noticed that my levels of empathy are very low, because that's just how my ASD manifests. So in that leadership position, which I have been in many times and continue to be in, I'm much more used of jail card, but just to make people realize that I'm not being awkward, or I don't have a choice in how I'm behaving, but actually to try and give people the opportunity to discover it, or to ask me questions, or to find ways around it so that we can work together in a much stronger way moving forward.
I love that. Yeah, definitely. And I don't know if this is helpful. It's a very simple thing that I've just sort of been reminded of, John, as you've been talking, but when I'm on public transport, and sometimes in certain rooms, I'll wear the sunflower wristband, which is obviously just a subtle way. So there's a sunflower wristband or lanyard or brooch that you can get, and all it says is that, you know, there's neurodivergence there, or there's an unseen disability. I wouldn't refer to my own neurodivergence disability. Some people do, some people don't. But it's sort of a subtle visual thing that says there's a presentation of something, and that can sometimes help ease a conversation or ease that awareness into play. So I can send a link to that as well if that's useful. Like I say, it's a very simple thing, but it can be helpful. Brilliant. I'm going to check out Neuroscience and Communications as well by Cogan Page. Thank you for that. Sarah has asked me as well, Sarah Ayn has asked me to remind you all as well that she did put a guide about neurodivergence and neuroinclusion in the Volunteer Hub sometime earlier this year. And just to remind you all that that is in there as a resource just to read or reread should you want to go back there. I will put a few more resources together in a document for you, and I will send all of this over to Hayley. Shall I send this to you? Who's the best person to
Yes,
send
please,
it
the
to?
volunteer team.
Yeah. Perfect. Good stuff. So I'll send that over. We are at 12:45 already. That has gone so fast. I hope it's been useful enough as a beginning into some of this stuff, or a way of just remembering some of these pieces. And let's just keep the conversation going, and let's just keep being as neuroinclusive as we can.
That's great.
Thank you so much.
Just want to say thank you, Danny, on behalf of the volunteer team, and I'm sure those who attended today, it's been a really useful session, and we'll obviously share this with other group chairs who unfortunately weren't able to make it today because they just missed out. But yeah, we'll share it and your slides as well. So thank you so
Brilliant.
much. Thank you
Thanks,
everyone else for
everyone.
attending.
Danny, really great.
Thank you. Lovely to see you all.
Thank
Take
you.
care, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.